Hey, Fed heads. Welcome to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings. We're going to be here pairing the Warfighter Tobacco Company 7.62 Garrison with a couple whiskeys, couple rums. I guess it's a couple scotches and a couple rums. So light up a cigar, get your drink ready, and we'll be right back. Hey, Fed heads. Welcome back. Hope you got yourself a cigar while we were away. I mean, we didn't give you much time, but we gave you a little bit. I mean, hopefully, if you're watching, you've already got everything ready to go. And let me make sure we're live here because it's not showing up on my little Facebooks. Yeah, we live. All right. So Dennis is out this week. Once again, he'll hopefully be back next week, I think. We'll see and we'll let you know. But in the meantime, we've got our good friend John, the Cigar Surgeon McTavish here. John, how you doing, buddy?
Good, Trippy. How you doing? Back from the dead, back to guest co-host yet again because, it's summer, or at least it is up here because we skipped right over spring, so I'm ready to pair and smoke. And
It's like 75 degrees out right now in my garage with a T-shirt that's suspiciously the exact same color as yours.
hashtag no planning.
No, not at all. Mine's not a developing palate shirt, but still.
We could probably hook you up. I mean, we probably have the budget for it.
You know a guy?
I know a guy. It might come out of my salary, but, I know a guy.
So we're here smoking the Warfighter. This is the 7.62 Garrison Edition. For those who aren't aware, they do an interesting thing for their six core line blends. They have two lines. They have these, and each one has three blends. So the two lines are the Garrison, which is kind of the it's when you're on the home front looking nice. Got your dress blues on or whatever they call them in the Army. I'm not sure.
Hashtag fancy. Fancy pants.
They're just kind of fancier. And then they've got the Field Edition, which is kind of a FDE colored band that looks very like the kind of thing you would take out of a crate that got shipped over to the desert.
Camos.
Yeah, exactly. It like it would come in an ammo can or something. But then within those, each one has a 5.56, a 7.62, and a 50 cal, which of course are named after ammunition calibers that are frequently used by the U.S. military. And tonight
it's a great effect.
We're smoking the 7.62. I've heard rumors that John has a bunch of fun facts about 7.62, but I'll talk about the blend a little bit first. The 7.62 is a Rosado wrapper from Nicaragua with a Nicaraguan binder and fillers from Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic. And they qualify it as medium strength, which I would agree with. It's not too strong, but it's got some bite to it. It's got a little bit of spice, which I like.
They come out of they're now out of the Plasencia factory out of Nicaragua, correct?
Yes.
Previously out of an unnamed factory, the Dominican Republic, which Trippy does a fantastic, if you guys haven't checked it out, the Cigar Federation IPCPR coverage back in 2017, which seems like a long time ago. Trippy has a great interview with the guys from Warfighter, and you should check it out because there's a lot of really cool information. And they got a booth award, which was really cool.
Yeah, the best. I think it was the best new mid-size booth or the best new small booth. I think they had a double booth, so I think it would have been mid-size. But small might be 1 to 2 slots. I don't know. But either way, they had a really sweet booth. And if like John said, if you haven't watched the interview, go check it out. If for nothing else than just see their booth. So what do you think of the cigar so far?
So it's this, and I'm can't believe I'm saying this live on the air, but I've been saving my Warfighters because I want to sit down and do a proper review. But I knew we were going to do the show, and I've got a few to work with. So I was like, we were talking, do we go with the 50 cal? Do we go with the 5.56? And the 7.62 kind of seemed like the right cigar for the show because it's kind of right in the middle. We saw that Habano Rosado wrapper, and we're thinking, that might be a great option for pairing, and maybe even some more advanced pairings. It starts out, it's got, I love that Habano, I love that spice. It's just got that great white pepper spice. It just kind of sits on your palate like a hot Indian dish or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's nice, and I'm trying to retrohale here and trying to get my head around it while maintaining my speaking notes. But so far so good. Obviously that band is sexy. Get that nice silver band. Packaging is sharp. I love it when a new company comes on the market and then you look at their packaging, their marketing, and it just seems like they've been around for 5 or 6 years because it's just they've got it all covered right from the boxes to the swag. Which, by the way, they've got some really cool swag, and it occurs to me that I should have got a Warfighter shirt for the show because I really like their shirts.
Their shirts are
awesome.
really cool.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple hats that have like the Velcro, and I thought about wearing the Warfighter, the rubber patch that they sell on a hat, but I decided to wear my Captain America hat since I just watched. Well, partially because it's America, partially because I watched Infinity War over the weekend, which is pretty sweet.
We can talk about that in the full spoilers post-draw show, maybe.
Oh, I would love to. Let's do that. But first, let's talk about some fun 7.62 facts before we get into our pairings. I want to hear some of your research.
So a lot of people might not know this, but because I think of Canadians, what do Canadians know about guns? First of all, per capita, I think Canada is number 3 in the world for per capita firearm ownership, and I happen to be in the quote-unquote Texas of Canada. But I did do a little bit of research because I love that research. So obviously the 3 sizes, the 5.56, the 7.62, and the 50 cal. The 5.56 is the most common round used by the American Army. It's also the standard round used by the NATO Army. 7.62 is the standard round used by the NATO Army and used by battle rifles of the American armies throughout World War I, World War II, and Korea. Also, it's a great round when you just absolutely need to obliterate something. But the 7.62, what that means, because it's science millimeters, and actually the corresponding freedom degrees is I think 30 cal is essentially the essential equivalent in caliber, roughly.
Roughly, it's actually .308 caliber.
Right. Yeah.
So like
slightly off.
Buy a rifle that. So this is a really confusing thing that happens with 5.56 and with 7.62. So if you buy a rifle that's .308 Winchester, it's not safe to use 7.62. If you buy a 7.62 rifle, it's safe to use .308 in there because it's the exact same size. The NATO cartridges are just a little hotter.
Yeah.
So if you have stuff that's rated for something lower, you don't want to use something that's a little more powerful.
Consult your local gun expert before you switch out cartridges because that could ruin your entire day. But the 7.62 designation is the internal diameter of the barrel at the lance. So that's the measurement of the internal diameter of that. And interestingly enough, the Russian caliber, so a lot of people think 7.62, they automatically think of the AK-47. Interestingly enough, the AK-47 rounds, the Russian rounds, and some of the Chinese rounds can actually be 7.82 caliber, which is kind of funny.
That happens a lot in the gun world where they coin a name and then over time it slightly changes and they're just like, we'll just leave it with the old name.
So some of the common rifles that have either through history or currently using a 7.62 round is the M1 carbine, of course, one of the most famous rifles, the Springfield, the M14, the AK-47, which everyone knows, the French FN FAL, and the Hector and Koch G3 battle rifle. But the issue is the 7.62 is a very penetrative round. I mean, you could be standing on the side of a tree, and that round will go through the tree, through your if you've got body armor, through your body armor and through you. The problem is the 7.62 weighs a lot more than a 5.56. So the reason that NATO and the United States switched over is because the thinking was you need a high penetrative round with long distance, but most of the engagements were typically around 300 yards, 300 freedom yards. So it was kind of overkill. And frankly, when you're carrying out ammo that weighs significantly more than a 5.56, they realized, well, we'll use a 5.56, which is still extremely lethal, even above 300 yards, but you can carry way more ammo. And at the end of the day, if you run out of ammo, buddy, you're in trouble in a fight. So it turns out having more ammo and, engaging at the normal rounds or the normal rate that you normally do, probably best to go. So, all the main rifles are 5.56. They're still 7.62 in wide use, but that's a little quick history of the 7.62 for those who are wondering.
So 7.62, the stuff that it's still used in is a lot of like the the U.S. doesn't really use battle rifles anymore. They've really kind of switched to assault rifles.
Yeah.
But they still use designated marksman rifles, DMRs.
Right.
A lot of those are like I'm trying to remember what the military name is. The civilian version is the AR-10.
Yeah.
But something like that. That's basically an AR-15 scaled up. And Scott Jansen, he of course is El Presidente over at Warfighter Tobacco. He says we need to send him some addresses and he'll get us a couple of shirts. Everybody in the comments is trying to jump in on that deal.
I mean, seriously though, like their patches are super cool. You really got to check out their swag page, and that's what I was talking about. Like for a company that hasn't been around for 7 years, their swag game's on point, their shirts are on point, their hats are on point. It's just cool stuff. It's cool stuff, you know. And we didn't really talk about the fact that it's veteran owned and operated.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not, these guys aren't pretend warriors. These guys have been out in the thick of things. Some of them still active duty. Actually, one of the guys is still active duty. But, you know, these are guys that have seen the real deal, been out there protecting your freedom. So, you know, it's always nice to see a veteran-owned company and support a veteran-owned company. And, you know, just a little shout out for Cigars for Warriors, because unfortunately, Cigars for Warriors can't take donations from cigar companies anymore, so they're relying on your donations. So since we're talking about a veteran-owned company, consider donating either cigars or cash to Cigars for Warriors, because shipping costs a lot. And you know, if you're out in the thick of things, you're out in the desert, you're bored, you want a cigar, you know, they really appreciate it.
Yeah, and with a lot of companies, I'm not 100% positive that Warfighter does this. With a lot of companies, if you order a box and you say take 5 out and send them, like Barry was saying last week, a lot of retailers or companies that are shipping direct to the consumer, like Warfighter, will do that for you.
Mm-hmm. Super good, guys. So I'm actually getting I'm starting to get some cocoa off the Retrohale, which is kind of a really nice counterbalance to that spice. I got a little bit of woodiness and maybe a little bit of earth underneath that. Like I don't know how to describe that. It's not like a potting soil. It's like a rich kind of volcanic soil.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It reminds me of like that almost black, really dark, like clay kind of soil.
Yeah. It's nice though.
Really,
it's
like
it's
mineral
kind of what I was
rich,
hoping for.
I guess.
Say again?
Mineral rich, I guess.
Yeah.
The term that comes to mind.
Well, this is kind of the profile I was hoping. Yeah, nice chunky Nicaraguan soil. I was really hoping for this profile because that's what I was aiming for on my pairings tonight. So I was either going to look like a big dummy, or I was going to look like I had my stuff together, and hopefully I look like my stuff together. So.
I mean, I looked like kind of a dummy last week. A couple of my pairings were just way off. And I'm pairing one of the same things here, so I'm hoping that that doesn't happen this time. But let's get into our pairings and talk about them.
Copy that.
I'm trying to decide whether to switch my pairings up, because I know your second pairing is the same as one of mine. So I think I'm going to switch them up. So I'm going to go in the wrong order here.
So just to let you know, the reason I did that is because my thought was it's going to be really sweet, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to overpower the whiskey. So
my first pairing here is going to be something that's new to me. It came out a couple years ago, the Lagavulin 8.
Oh, girl.
So ever since I heard about this, I was intrigued by it. So this is it was originally a limited edition. I'm not 100% sure that it still is. I think it's now regular production, since it's now 2 years later and it's still on the shelves. So I think they're probably making quite a bit of it. It's interesting because it was a celebratory whiskey that they did for their 200th anniversary, right, but it's half the age of the youngest whiskey they normally produce, which it's really curious to me. It makes me wonder if they did it partially for that reason, and they just kind of wanted to find a way to make a younger whiskey because they were running out of the 16-year-old stuff.
People, stop buying it. Stop taking all our 16-year-old Lagavulin.
I mean, that's the problem with the entire whiskey industry right now, is that especially when your youngest product is 16 years old, anything they're making now, they had to think, what are people going to be buying 16 years from now?
Yep.
And try to produce that amount. And if you mess up, that can be a very expensive mistake on either side.
I mean, I think what I like about the younger peated whiskeys is that if you really want sort of a more full peat forward expression, you actually need a younger whiskey, because the longer it spends in cask, the less that peat's going to influence the whiskey. So, typically in the younger whiskeys or no age statement whiskeys, you can get a lot of peat coming through, which is, if you're a peat head, it's awesome.
Exactly, and I think you do get a little bit more peat with this one. Interestingly, the color, I don't have any Lagavulin 16 at home, but the color to me looks lighter.
It's kind of like that straw color, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a little darker than an Ardbeg, but not by a whole lot. But anyway, Lagavulin was founded in 1816. Of course, 2016 was their 200th anniversary. They have 2 wash stills and 2 spirit stills, but I couldn't find any information on how much whiskey they actually produce per year. I'm not sure why.
I bet it's probably like 330,000 freedom gallons or so.
That sounds about right to me. I mean, it can't be a ton.
No.
Since they really only have one whiskey that's attainable to people, and it's fairly expensive compared to most other entry-level whiskeys. So, I think it's safe to say that 330,000 freedom gallons is probably about right. They chose 8-year, and again, it really makes me wonder if they decided we're going to do this for our 200th anniversary, we're going to do an 8-year, or if they said we need to make an 8-year because we need something younger.
Right.
This is a very good reason. So Alfred Bernard, who was I'm not sure exactly how to qualify him. He wasn't really a whiskey reviewer, but he was some sort of prominent whiskey aficionado. He visited the distillery in 1886, tasted whatever their 8-year was at the time, and said that it was exceptionally fine. And that's their justification for creating this for their 200th anniversary. So this is kind of paying homage to that, and they call it a reinterpretation of the spirit that he had at that time.
Nice.
So obviously the youngest whiskey in here is 8 years old. A really interesting thing about it is 48% ABV or 96 proof. You don't see a lot of 8-year whiskeys at that high proof.
I dare say you've seen almost none.
Exactly. So I think that kind of adds to the specialness of it a little bit, because it is a little stronger than most whiskeys you're going to find in this age range and this price range, because I think it's only around, I think I paid about $60 for it, which means it's probably about like 50 at most in most states.
It's pretty reasonable.
A little cheaper. So I'm gonna take a couple sips and let's see what John thinks about his first pair.
Sounds good. So tonight's pairings, I kind of went with first of all, I wanted to kind of go what it classifies an American style pairing. So these are pairings that you would commonly see done in the United States, very common brands in the United States, and that's what I kind of tried to stick to. The first off is a classic, Johnny Walker. And for all the whiskey snobs out there, this is actually my favorite Johnny Walker by a country mile, a country freedom mile. So this is the Johnny Walker Green Label, and take careful note, it is not a blended whiskey. It is a blended malt Scotch whiskey, and I'll get into that in a second. But it is
I was about
15
to say,
years.
what does that mean?
Yeah, it's 15 years. So that means, like Trippy was saying on his, that means the youngest whiskey in this is 15 years. That doesn't mean the oldest is 15. They almost certainly have some older whiskey in there, probably in the 20 to 30 year range. Just a couple drops to keep it honest. I'm losing Nicaragua. There she goes.
Love you, Nicaragua. I'll miss
Nicaragua. It's the, there's no snow, but there's a little bit of wind, and that's just how it rolls here in the spring, summer of Canada. Anyways, hold that up. It's a little bit more, what you'd expect like an ex-bourbon cask whiskey to be. It's kind of that amber color. A little bit about Johnny Walker. Now, I know you talked about them a couple shows ago, and I talked about them a number of shows before that, but Johnny Walker essentially really created blended whiskey. There was not a market. Blended whiskey did not exist. There was single malt whiskey, there was whiskey, and there was no blended whiskey. They invented blended whiskey in 1867, and they're huge. So for all the whiskey snobs out there who are thinking, blended whiskey, this is blended Scotch malt. It's entirely Scotch malt. It has no grain whiskey in it whatsoever. It is 100% Scotch whiskey. They vat it together, and they try to keep the flavor consistent between bottle and bottle, and they use a number of different distilleries to do that. Because they're using other distilleries' products, they can't tell you, officially, they can't tell you what those whiskeys are. It's against the laws in Scotland. But Johnny Walker is one of the most recognized Scotch brands in the world, sold in almost every single country, literally every country in the world. Annual sales, get this, over 180 million liters of whiskey, or just over 45.5 million Freedom gallons, which is just, I mean, as a
That's
measure,
insane.
it's insane. I think the math of it is like 70% or 80% of the world's whiskey is
And
Johnny Walker.
it's worth pointing out there are a lot of distilleries in Scotland that we love their single malts,
Mhm.
and they barely make any money off of single malts. They make
Yeah.
pretty much all their money off of Johnny Walker.
Yeah, and there's a lot of distilleries out there who, for many years, you couldn't buy their product because all of it,
Yeah.
every single drop was going into Johnny Walker, one form or another, and they've got a lot of expressions. Um, of course, again, Trippy talked about this, but they've got the iconic square bottle. It's obviously a talking point, but it's also smart economics because you can fit better packaging on the shelf in boxes. There's less breakage, so that's kind of what they're known for. It's an iconic bottle. Nobody else uses it, and they started that bottle in 1820. And we already talked about this was introduced in 1867. This particular Scotch was discontinued in 2012, which made me extremely upset. And then I saw it on the shelf. I didn't even hear any news about coming back. I happened to see it on the shelf, passing through some store, and I thought maybe they had old stock, so I bought up a bunch because I love it. But it officially returned in 2016, reintroduced by Diageo. Boo, Diageo, boo. I don't know. It's a big drink company, so people like to hate the big guys. I don't know. I don't know why.
I mean, you know who else is owned by Diageo?
Everybody.
These guys.
Oh yeah, they're a huge,
They own
huge
everybody.
company. They own everybody. So some of the areas, if you're prone to Scotch areas, whiskey areas, they have whiskey in there from the Space Side, from Highland, from the Lowland, and from the islands. And if you're one of those guys who's like, Johnny Walker Green doesn't taste the same as it did when they discontinued it. No, untrue. It's the exact same blend recipe. So they discontinued it. They brought it back. I guarantee you that Johnny Walker has taken great care to make sure their notes are complete and their master distillers know exactly what they're doing when they blend. So it's the same. It's the same recipe. My palate confirms the same recipe. I'm going to take some sips while you talk about how your pairing is going.
I mean, that's the whole thing with Scotch is every Scotch is like, I don't believe there's any distilleries out there that will sell you a bottle of single barrel Scotch. Pretty much every bottle out there is a blend of different barrels, ranging in age, and their goal 100% of the time is to keep it exactly the same bottle
Mhm.
to bottle. And I mean, Johnny Walker is one of the best at that.
If you buy Coke, you don't want to get a different Coke when I say you, I mean the consumers that are out there that are paying money for this product. They do not want a different product every time they bring it off the shelf. It has to be exactly the same year over year for 20 years, 30 years, and that's what these guys do. They taste it and they make sure it is exactly the same so that the Johnny Walker you buy today is the same Johnny Walker you buy 10 years from now.
Yeah, it's very similar to making cigars.
Mhm.
Cigars have a little more variance typically, but Scotch is the same. And before we move on, I want to thank our sponsor, the Cigar Federation store. If you haven't already, pick up some Bishop blends from Black Label Trading Company. They've got a couple boxes left. And if history is any indication, you're not going to see any more until next year.
I got my grubby order. I got my grubby order in like immediately when I got the notification. I was subscribed to the newsletter. I got a Bishop's blend. I got some Findeless Mundos from Nomad. I got some other goodies in there too, but I understand they're on delivery to a good friend of mine.
Yeah, and I actually got my box of Bishops today,
Nice.
which I'm very excited to smoke. So moving on to my Lagavulin. It's interesting because it's reminiscent of Lagavulin 16. But it's not. It's certainly not the same thing. It's a little more aggressive, I guess. And I'm not. I don't know off the top of my head what the proof of the Lagavulin 16 is. I'm guessing it's lower than 48. I don't feel like it could be 48. But there's definitely more peat in here. There's definitely a lot of fruit, like fruity sweetness. And I'm really just surprised by kind of how elegant it is for how rough it is, because it starts off really elegant, and like then you get that hit of smoke from the peat, and then when you swallow you get like that burn on the back of your tongue. Um, I don't know. I need to take a couple more sips. I don't think I was sipping enough while you were talking there.
For pairing science.
Yeah.
So one of the things I really like about Johnny Walker, and a lot of people talk about the flavor and they say smooth, and that's not really a flavor descriptor.
Mm-mm.
But that is a true description of a lot of Johnny Walkers. They want to make it easy drinking. They don't want to make it harsh. They don't want any one flavor note to stand out. And that's certainly the case for the Green Label. What I like about the Green Label is that it's very reminiscent of sort of all the best things you want out of ex-bourbon type whiskeys. It's got that really nice sort of sweet corn influenced bourbon, little bit of spice. But the spice doesn't linger. It's got like a medium to short finish, and you're left with kind of this nice, medium strength sweetness on the palate without being syrupy or cloyingly sweet. And it's a great pairing. It's a fantastic pairing with the Garrison 7.62. In fact, I'm actually getting, because of the whiskey, I'm starting to get a lot more woody character out of the cigar. So I'm getting a little oak, I'm getting a little cedar, and the sweetness kind of offsets a little of that white pepper, which is sad because I like the white pepper, but it does push that white pepper aside, and the sweetness brings out some different flavors that I wasn't getting in the cigar.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot more like chocolate and wood from the cigar and less of the spice. This Lagavulin has an extraordinarily long finish, and it's like almost peppery to me. Like it's almost got a little bit of spice to it on the
I can see that.
It's definitely sweeter. It doesn't taste as like oily and medicinal as Lagavulin 16. It's kind of it's weird because it's more aggressive and friendlier at the same time. Where it's kind of got a little bit of that that thinness that makes it a little bit less like cloying on your tongue.
Right.
But at the same time, it's got a lot more sweetness up front and then a way longer like smoky finish.
One of the things I forgot to mention on the Johnny Walker 15 Green Label is that it is 43%, which is always nice. The minimum it has to be bottled at is 40%, so it's always nice when they go above the minimum. 43% is nice. It's still got a little bit more character without being, thin or anything that sometimes I find in 40% whiskeys.
Yeah. We got a lot of comments referencing, as we did last week. I think anytime I have whiskey on the show, this is going to happen. We've got a bunch of comments from fellow members of the Whiskey Tribe, which is the Whiskey Vault channel on YouTube. They've got a whole Facebook group thing with a bunch of inside jokes. They call themselves Magnificent Bastards, which I think is a fantastic moniker for somebody who appreciates whiskey.
Absolutely.
So Evan Kirshner wants to know, can you get barrel selects of Scotch?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but sort of, not really. The barrel selects you can get are typically from a third party that buys the barrel and then puts it in bottles for you and sells it to you.
Correct. And there's a lot of them. I've talked on the show before about the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, which is one of the bigger ones. But there's a number of, and of course, all of them escape me off the top of my brain, which is funny because I own like all of them. Yeah. I have an expression from 5 different independent bottlers, and it's the same thing. They can say that they're bottling it and it's a whiskey from Speyside or whatever. But that's a great way to try whiskey from a distillery that you really like or you really love, and it's going to be a completely, like I've had Macallan's from an independent bottler, and it was like among the best Macallan I've ever had in my life. So it's got that core influence of Macallan, but it's different. It's not the same.
I've had a lot of Lafroigs from independent bottlers, and it's different because when you buy a bottle of Lafroig 10 or Lafroig quarter cask or triple wood, is that what it's called?
Triple wood, yep.
Okay. For some reason, triple wood didn't sound right. I thought it was triple something else. But when you get those, they're blending together a bunch of scotches that are all from the Lafroig distillery, but are different ages, different parts of the warehouse. And they're always going for the same flavor. When you get one of those single bottle, or when you get one of those independent bottling versions, you're getting a single barrel, and you're finding out one of the puzzle pieces that goes into a normal production bottle.
Yeah. And you can get like really funky expressions from a distillery. I've had, one of the fun parts about going to a tasting, if your local bottle shop has tastings, is that you try it out and you're like, well, and you do it blind a lot of the time. So you go, I have no idea what this is. and you find out afterwards it's from a distillery that you drink all the time. And that's kind of the fun thing. It's like, well, it doesn't really taste like anything, and that's because there's so much variance between barrel. I mean, there's a million different characteristics and dials that go into each individual barrel. So you can have from the same distillery you've had 100 bottles from, and you have an expression, and it doesn't taste anything else like anything. And sometimes they screw up. Sometimes they put something in a cask, and they're like, oh yeah, no, we don't want that at all. And that's why they sell it. They're like, yeah, that doesn't really match our style. So somebody bottles it up, and then crazy whiskey fiends like us buy it up and go, I love it.
Yeah. And a lot of times it was a barrel that, like, the distiller just couldn't figure out something to do with it. So they just let it sit around until somebody was willing to buy it.
It's like having extra tobacco you don't know what to do with.
Yeah, exactly. And which I wasn't going to mention it, but it's kind of like the lost and found, where it's like,
right.
For some reason this barrel didn't work out, so they left it sitting in the warehouse for an extra 15 years longer than they meant to. And then some guy buys it and puts it in bottles, and you get a really weird, interesting expression from a distillery. So one flavor note that I just noticed in the Lagavulin is medicinal, but not in like that Lafroig Band-Aid kind of medicinal. There's a tiny bit of that,
right.
But it's more of like a cough syrup kind of medicinal. Which, I mean, I love those weird notes because people think you're crazy for enjoying them, but I love them.
What I think I love about the peat is, to me, it's a little bit like hops in an IPA. You can sort of, and this is going to sound really terrible, but you can run over some of the impurities or maybe young characteristics of a whiskey by putting more peat in there. And you can do the same thing with a beer. If you put more hops in there, you can run over some of the unbalanced character, which sometimes you try on purpose. But, the nice thing about having more peat is that some of those, more alcohol-y estery characteristics in a younger whiskey, which I'm not a huge fan of, sometimes you can get those nicely run over by peat, and you're not picking those up so much on a younger whiskey like that.
Yeah, and that's I think why a lot of people have a hard time with peat, similar to the way a lot of people have a hard time with IPAs, is that it's so overpowering that at first it's hard to get past. Once you learn to appreciate it, you can kind of taste the flavors underneath that it's covering up. And Evan Kirshner has a follow-up question. He wants to know how you know it's an independent bottler. Usually it'll say on the bottle, there aren't, I can't think of any independent bottlers that you can just walk into a liquor store and buy. Because typically, if they're doing an independent bottling, you're probably going to get somewhere between 400 to 500 bottles most out of that barrel.
See, I'm lucky because I'm in the whiskey capital of Canada, so I can walk into the shop right now and I can pick up pretty much every independent bottler expression off the shelf, and everything across the map. Like, I could probably buy something from 100 different distilleries from an independent bottler right now. So I'm very spoiled up here.
I don't recall ever seeing an independent bottle in a store. I've only seen it like on the secondary market or when I've gone to a friend's house who's part of the SMWS. But they're hard to find. Your best bet if you want something from an independent bottler is something like the Whiskey Exchange or Master of Malt or something like that.
Can't do Master Malt anymore.
Oh, you can't? I didn't know that.
Whiskey News, they got bought out.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And no longer available in the United States, which is kind of sad. That's kind of, I think, one of the things that pisses people off a lot is when these large drink companies buy up a distributor like that or a bottler like that, and then they completely change their distribution. And I know there's a lot of people online in members of the whiskey clubs that are very upset about that because that was their way of getting these fantastic whiskeys to them in the United States. Now they can't.
Oh, that sucks.
It's crap.
I'm really sad about that.
Oh.
But anyway, Evan, you can, I'm sure that if you look on the internet, you can hunt down a couple independent bottlings, but they're not easy to find and they're never going to be cheap.
No.
I think probably the minimum price is like, if it's something that's pretty young from a big distillery that isn't that sought after, you might be able to get something for like $60 or $70, but generally you're talking upwards of $150 or so.
Now, that being said, Trippy, I've seen some independent bottling, like I was talking about the Macallan earlier. I had an independent bottler of Macallan. I think it was 22 years old or 24 years old, and it was like half the price of what an equivalent bottled Macallan would be. And it was from a time period where, they were producing really, really great whiskey. So sometimes, you can get a gem for a mint. And again, like Tripp was saying, it's going to cost you. I mean, you got to pay to play for sure. But if you're looking for a really great expression from a distillery that you know really well, you can make that happen.
And Scott Jansen from Warfighter says he respects that you're flying that Nicaraguan flag, and you're really flying it right now.
I'm really flying SOS Nicaragua. For those who aren't aware, there's I would characterize it as social upheaval right now. The Nicaraguan people are going through some times, and obviously flying it because the cigars are made out of Nicaragua, but also as solidarity for the Nicaraguan people. Both Trippy and I, Nicaragua's got a very special place in our heart, as do all the people in Nicaragua. So,
yeah, absolutely. But we're gonna move on to our next pairing. I believe we're pairing the same thing. We're both pairing Zafra 21.
Zafra, love it, so good. Look at it.
It's a very good, very old rum that is surprisingly affordable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I think a bottle of this is like $70 or something at most. It might even be a little less than that. But it's 21 years old, aged in bourbon barrels.
Actually, 21 years old.
Yeah, it's actually 21 years old. And other than that, I haven't been able to find a lot of information. Do you have a cheat sheet there, John, that you've got a bunch of info about?
I do my homework, Trippy. I do my homework. So first of all, the term Zafra is a Spanish word coming that describes the act of harvesting sugarcane. So that's where that came from. Now, they kind of play, I'm going to put Zafra on point here, on fire here a little bit, because the way they phrase this lends you to believe a certain thing, which isn't necessarily true. So they say after the harvest, their skilled master distiller transforms the gathered cane into rum, which makes you think that it's a rum agricole. Now, we've talked about this on the show before. There's two types of rum. There's industrial rum, which is 90%, 85% of the world's rum, and there's a rum agricole, which is agriculture rum. And all that means is it's the pre-distillation point of the rum. So most rums are turned into molasses. In fact, a lot of cases, the molasses comes as a byproduct of the sugarcane process because you're trying to get sugar from the sugarcane. That's where the money is. You take the molasses that's left over and you can distill that and make delicious rum. The other way to do it is rum agricole, where you take the sugarcane and you press it. And out of that pressing, you get juice, which gives you agricole rum. Now, obviously, the downside of that is you're not getting as much money for that sugar cane as if you sold the sugar, which is where your money is, and then turned that into molasses. So this is, just so we're all clear, this is an industrial rum. They turn it into molasses and they make rum. There's no downside to it. That's how most of the rum in the world is made. But I just want to be clear because they're playing a little fast and loose with the description. They're kind of avoiding that term, and I think they should embrace it. That's how the rum is made. Of course, like most rum that's industrial, it's using column distillation, which is a continual distillation. That's where your money is, so you can continually run your distillation process. There's really no downtime. That's how Irish whiskey is made as well, with a column still. Column stills are very efficient and produce a crap ton of whiskey, which is why I use it.
So Don Bleecker asked, is it better than Flor de Caña 25 or just different? I would say just different.
Just different.
But the big thing that it's got over Flor de Caña 25 is Flor de Caña 25 typically runs about $150 a bottle.
It's a few ducats.
This, I just did some research. My local Total Wine has it for $46.99.
That's absurd.
For a 21-year-old spirit.
And I want to be clear on something, because sometimes in the rum industry, the age statements are a little fast and loose. A lot of rums are actually made by the Solera method. So in the Solera method, you're averaging the age of the rum that's going in there. So you got some 3-year rum, some 8-year rum, some 7-year rum, and maybe some 25. This Zafra, because the laws in the United States are very clear that if you put an age statement on the rum and it's not a Solera method, that has to follow the age statement rules, which means 21 is the youngest whiskey that's in there, or the youngest rum that's in there. So this Zafra could absolutely have 30-year rum or 35-year rum, or even 40. But you're guaranteed 21 years, which, for how much did you say it was?
$47.
$47 for a 21-year-old rum is kind of highway robbery from the perspective of you're robbing from the rum maker.
Yeah.
Because that's so cheap. It's so cheap.
John says that Florida Canyon 25 is $300 where he is.
Yeah.
So it's not better. I wouldn't say it's better.
Just different.
Just because it's hard to compare, but it's different, and you could have 6 bottles for the same price.
And it's oh god, that's so good. It's like anything, right? It's like any agricultural product takes on the characteristics. So people talk all the time, how is Nicaraguan tobacco different from the Dominican tobacco? It's like, well, it's the same as if you grew a carrot in the Dominican Republic and you grew a carrot in Nicaragua. It's a carrot. You know what a carrot tastes like? Those carrots aren't going to taste the same. It's weird to think about, but it's kind of the fun thing. So when you talk about an end product like this, where the environment and the humidity and the temperature and the soil and all that all factors into the end product, especially after 21 years, it's radically different than Florida Canyon. I love Florida Canyon. I drink Florida Canyon all the time, probably more than I should, but it's very different than a Zafra, which is by the way made out of Panama.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that. Man, this rum is fantastic.
Oh, it's so good, right? I mean,
it's so sweet and like, I hate to use the term, but it's so smooth. Like it starts off with some astringency on the nose. And when you first taste it, you get that. But I feel like having let it sit in the glass for half an hour here and letting it evaporate a little bit, I feel like that's really helped it with with that astringency. I feel like I'm not getting almost any of that on the palate anymore.
Yeah, if you have a white rum or a rum that hasn't been aged in casks, I often find, especially with the younger rum or a white rum or anything like that, rum tends to be, for me, really alcohol forward. And by alcohol forward, I mean that estery quality, like rubbing alcohol. I am not at all. My palate is very sensitive to rubbing alcohol, which is why I'm a bit of a whiskey snob, because I don't like younger whiskeys where that's forward. And I find in a lot of cases with younger rums, I can taste that immediately. Like Tripp was saying, you get that a little bit on the nose, but underneath that, there's almost like a slightly toasted brown sugar, and it's like you almost want to chew it. It's that.
Yeah, good. It's really like thick and rich,
syrupy.
Yeah, syrupy is the
right. It's got like oranges and like tropical fruit. I mean, it's sweet.
Tropical
There's no question.
Exactly
You're not going to pound this.
There's like banana and like mango-ish kind of sweetness. Like if you don't like sweet rum, this isn't a rum for you. But if you like bourbons, you're probably gonna like this rum. Because it really gets a lot of that bourbon character, and it's got a lot of that like that woody barrel note kind of flavor.
And these are because we didn't really talk about this, but their master blender barrel. So they use exclusively bourbon casks, and this is of course a blend like we're talking about with whiskey. It's the same idea. They blend a number of casks together to get a consistent flavor. But these are all bourbon casks, and I think that kind of comes through. Like it's got that that bourbony stone fruit vanilla kind of character to it.
Yeah, the vanilla kind of peachy. And their master blender. I took a note on this. I don't know if you did. He is his name is Francisco Don Pancho Fernandez, and he was actually, they didn't specify where, but he's a Cuban rum master blender. So presumably he blended rum for one of the big rum companies in Cuba, I would guess.
That you know what, that makes a lot of sense now that you say that, because I would say next to like Cuban rum, this is probably the closest thing I've tasted that is kind of in that Venn diagram overlapping Cuban rum, and I haven't really gotten that from any other country before.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that until just now, but it does have a little bit of that. It doesn't quite have that like grassy bitterness that I get from Cuban rum, but it's got a touch of that.
It's good. It's really, really good. It's a little too good, actually.
Yeah, and it goes really well with the cigar. I feel like it might go better with like the broadleaf one.
The 50 cals, yeah.
The 50 cal.
I agree. Yeah.
Just because the sweetness overpowers the cigar a little bit, I think.
Still good, but yeah, 50 cal is probably a better way to go, and I would definitely avoid the 5.56 because the sweetness I think would just overpower some of the nuances of 5.56. Yep.
And before we get on to our last pairing, we're gonna thank our sponsor for the last segment, which is our good friends over at Drew Estate. They just announced this week, and they're about to launch this weekend, or might even be Friday.
So excited!
The Liga Privada number 9
excited.
Corona Viva.
Corona Viva.
Man, I'm so excited to try that cigar. Ever since I started seeing those, kind of around back in 2016 when everybody got their stealth releases out. We were talking yesterday about how Drew Estate was very blatant with theirs. So we all knew this was coming, but I'm very excited to finally try it. And so they're doing a launch this weekend at the Cigars International Superstore. And then they haven't announced exactly when, but over the next few months, I'm assuming they'll be rolling out everywhere, because it is going to be a full regular production cigar. And it's actually the first regular production Vitola that's launched since Liga Privada came out in 2000.
I can see that. Yeah,
I guess they added a couple in 2008.
Corona Viva, of course, is my favorite size of the Undercrown by far.
Same.
So when I heard it was, so obviously the classic black versus white argument is, do you like the number 9 or do you like the T52? And everyone seems split. No one seems to sort of step over that, like step on both sides of that line. You're either T52 guy or like a 9 guy. But I feel like in a Corona Viva size, that Liga 9
is going to be
that might switch me over.
Yeah, I'm just really excited for that cigar.
So excited!
Now we'll move on to our last pairing of the night. This one last week was a disaster, and I think it might be a disaster this time, but I did bring a straw so I can drop some water in there. This is Glenlivet Nadura.
Love it.
This is the heavily peated cask edition. So Glenlivet, I talked about it last week, but I'll go over it for anybody who missed last week's episode. They're located near the northern coast of Scotland in a little village called Moray. They were founded in 1824, and the only time they've ever closed, which is pretty rare, is during World War II.
Kind of needed the barley for the troops.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look up pretty much any distillery, they're going to have like 10 years here, 10 years there that they were closed entirely. And there was nobody in the building. It was just cleared out. They just had whiskey sitting in the warehouse and probably a security guard watching it.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is one of the few that has been continuously operated, except for that little blip for a couple of years during World War II. They are the largest selling whiskey, single malt brand in the U.S. and the second largest in the world. They have 7 wash and 7 spirit stills and produce an astounding 6 million liters or 1.5 million gallons, which is nothing compared to like Johnny Walker, but that's a lot of whiskey for one distillery to be pumping out.
Yeah, it is.
Nadura means natural in Gaelic, and originally it was basically a cask strength Glenlivet that was aged in bourbon barrels, and then of course this is the peated whiskey finish. So they've aged this one in heavily peated whiskey barrels instead, which I've heard are from Speyside, but I don't know. And it's of course bottled at cask strength, which is a ridiculous 61.5%.
Oh yeah, come get some. I absolutely love the Nadura Sherry Cask. They had the Nadura Sherry Cask 16, which was kind of my pairing go-to for cigars all across the world.
Oh yeah.
Hard to find though, because they only produced a certain amount of it, and I think it's pretty much gone from the market now. So you can still get a no age statement sherry version, but not quite the same. It's still good, but it's not quite the same.
If I remember correctly, I could be wrong. I think the sherry version is the duty free only version, but that might be a different variant of it.
Or Canada.
Oh, is it in Canada? So maybe it's not
a
version then.
We're, like I said, we got we got so many Scots up here that we got that whiskey on lockdown. Don't mess around. Give me our whiskey.
All right, so I'm going to take a couple sips of this while you talk about your last pairing.
So here's a bottle that I don't break out very often, but it's good. It's kind of if you're looking for an easy whiskey pairing whiskey, this is kind of another one of my go-tos. It's also one of the most popular brands for whiskey in North America. This is the Dalmore. It's got that cool stag's head on the front, which is really cool. This is their Cigar Malt Reserve. Interestingly enough, I don't have the ABV. Oh, there it is. So here's what's interesting is I've never seen another whiskey. This is at 44%.
That's just a weird number.
It's a weird number, right? It usually it's either 40, 43, 46, 48, or above. I've never, ever, ever seen another whiskey company come out with a 44, but that's what it is. Hold it up here. You can see it's quite a bit darker than the Johnny Walker. It takes on almost like a brown ale color or a red ale color. It's got a much darker color to it. Oh, it smells so good. Dalmore is located on the eastern coast of Scotland in the Northern Highlands. It's actually not that far from Inverness, which makes sense because a lot of distilleries need people to work at them, and they need to be near towns and cities. They were founded in 1839, a long time ago, like a lot of whiskey distilleries in Scotland. They use the Alness River as their water source. They have a total of eight stills. I don't know what the makeup is between wash and spirit, but I suspect it's probably like some weird like 5 and 3 or 3 and 5 kind of mix between wash and spirit stills. They, believe it or not, are in the top 25 of production for distilleries in Scotland. So they produce out of 8 stills 4.2 million liters, 1.1 million freedom gallons, and that number is actually a couple years out of date. So they could be as high as 1.4 now. And they weren't really known as because a lot of distilleries in Scotland you can go and visit, and they've got nice visitor centers, and they weren't really known as a visitor center kind of place. But they put £1 million of, which is I think $2.5 million US dollars or $2.2 million US, in overhauling the distillery and visitor center to make it a lot more friendly. So if you're in the Inverness area, it's definitely worth checking out the Dalmore. So this is matured initially, in American white oak ex-bourbon casks. And then they use 30-year-old Matsulum Oloroso sherry butts, which I love sherry. And then they use Cru Cabernet Sauvignon wine barriques as a finisher, which is interesting because, again, if you've listened to the show in the past when I've been on, I'm not really typically a fan of whiskeys in wine barrels. It doesn't really hit my palate. This particular one, obviously I own it, so I like it. It smells so good. You can get that Cabernet Sauvignon on the nose. It's definitely got that sort of sweet, crisp Cabernet nose to it. And underneath that, it's got a lot of syrupy bourbon notes. So I'm going to take some sips here and let you talk about how that third, it's number 3, third pairing of the night is going for you.
So I did a little bit of research, and I don't know what the Glenlivet Maduro was that was duty-free exclusive. I think it was the Oloroso, but it must have just been duty-free exclusive for a short time, because I remember being in a duty-free store like 3 or 4 years ago, and they had one, but that must have been old news.
Fake news.
This is aggressive as a pairing for this,
right?
As I expected. It's hard to get much flavor out of it because I feel like it's just too hot. I'm gonna add a little bit of water to it here.
So while you're doing that, this cigar malt is a little intense with the sherry, but unlike a lot of sherried whiskeys, and I would normally avoid a sherried whiskey with a Habano wrapper because it's, we talk about whether you want contrasting or complementary. I tend to avoid sherry whiskeys with Habano wrappers because it's too similar. There's too much of that pepper running over the pepper that's in the cigar. It's got just enough of the sherry in here that gives you that stewed fruit quality without bringing the spice you normally get from Oloroso sherry, which I love, but I would avoid in spades. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around it because it's very big. It's got a very big fruity stewed fruit quality, and it's almost, believe it or not, more sweet and syrupy than the Zafra.
Wow. So a thing that I've always wondered is, why do they call it cigar malt? I mean, I get that it's kind of supposed to go with cigars.
Yeah.
But what makes it a cigar malt? What makes it different that makes it pair better with cigars? Is it the sherry finish?
So I don't have an answer for that. Okay. It is marketed towards pairing with cigars 100%, But I suspect what it is that whoever their distillery master is, he probably sat down with some cigars and said, I want something that can complement a cigar, that can bring out some of the flavors in the cigar, that still has some core Scotch flavors, but isn't that, super alcohol forward or super fruity or super bourbony, that sometimes does run over cigars. And the problem with pairing with cigars is you do have to be careful about the strength. I mean, this cigar malt is not something I would pair with something that had a Connecticut shade wrapper, because Connecticut shade is just sometimes too light, and this would run that over. But Habano is good. That broadleaf from a 50 cal, I think, would be outstanding with this. In fact, I think this might pair perfectly with a 50 cal in my mind.
So the Nadura, the problem I'm having with this is that I have loved the Oloroso and the bourbon versions of Nadura. And this one, I feel like the whiskey itself is too thin, which makes the peat kind of take over a little bit.
That makes sense.
And then you end up with a little too much burn from the alcohol, and then a little too much smokiness from the peat. And
so just not very balanced.
Yeah, just not very balanced. That's exactly what it is. It's there's not a lot of sweetness there. There's not a lot of complexity that I'm able to find, because it's really just overpoweringly alcohol forward and peaty, which makes me think it's probably pretty young, probably under 10 years. Especially since they're not giving it an age statement. I mean, typically under 8 years, if there's anything in there that's under 8 years, they don't want to give it an age statement.
Yeah.
Is what I've found.
A lot of 3-year in there, I'm sure.
Yeah, you don't find a lot of like 3-4 year scotches that actually have an age statement. And this one definitely is aggressive. So I'm gonna go on some comments here. So apparently our local shop should have the new Liga Privadas on the 10th. That's very soon. I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to that. And actually, now that I think about it, Fabian's gonna be here that day.
Yeah.
And it's like it's right up against our show, so I think I might have to push our show back a little bit just so I can go say hey to Fabian and buy some.
Do it live.
Coronas. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll just go live from my phone.
Stream it live from your phone.
Gerard Shelley says he's really, really late and wants to know what's up with you, Surgeon.
Just enjoying the warm weather and some delicious cigars from Warfighter Tobacco. Enjoying some delicious pairings and enjoying this warm weather. Man, if it's above 60 degrees, I'm outside smoking and drinking, because it only lasts for a certain period of time, and I love it.
I'm gonna move back to my other pairings, because I'm disappointed that when I sit in front of the TV and I drink this Nadura peated whiskey cask finish, I get a lot more flavor from it than I do with a cigar for some reason. With a cigar, it just completely blows out my palate for a little bit. I actually think I need to drink some water to clear out.
Copy that.
I still have that like alcohol burn.
So I'm actually really enjoying the cigar malt with this cigar. It's not my best pairing of the night, but it's very enjoyable, and I would revisit this pairing again, and probably will revisit with the 50 cal as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that 50 cal. I don't think I've smoked any of the broadleaf stuff from Warfighter yet.
Yeah, that's some of the ones that I've set aside that I want to sit down and really take my time and do a proper review, because the guys there deserve it. And and by the way, if you're looking to find out Warfighter, so if you Google Warfighter Tobacco Company, you can find their Twitter, Instagram. You can check out their swag store. You can check out more about their cigars, Warfighter Tobacco Company. Really cool site and really cool guys. And like I said, check out the coverage that Trippy did at IPCPR 2017. Really good interview.
Yeah, dog. Man, I just went back to the Lagavulin, and I think this Nadura might be peatier than I'm even giving it credit for, because the Lagavulin is just all sweet and nice now. I barely get any peat off this Lagavulin.
Oh, this Johnny Walker Green Label is so light compared to the Dalmar. I mean, it's almost, I would almost describe it as delicate next to the Dalmar, because again, it's just not intended to be heavy and intense and super Scotch forward. It's supposed to be easy drinking. So they are radically different on the strength scale.
That's exactly what I'm looking at here. All three of my spirits tonight are radically different on the strength level. Like the Glenlivet is just overpoweringly strong. The Zafra is friendly but
Oh, it's so
super
good.
sweet.
Super sweet.
And then the Lagavulin is just kind of like in the middle there, where it's a little bit aggressive, but then it's got like a lot of uh, a lot of like light fruity notes, like almost citrusy.
Getting a lot more cocoa now at the halfway point of this 7.62 Garrison, especially with the Zafra. It's really starting to bring out the cocoa.
Yeah, yeah, I am getting a little more cocoa than I was before.
It's nice. I think just kind of based on our pairings tonight, I think I could confidently say I would not hesitate to pair ex bourbon cask whiskey with the 7.62. I think that's a great pairing, and you could do a lot of rums as long as they're not too sweet. I think rum is a great pairing as well. I'd probably stay away from bourbon because I think bourbon might be a little hot.
Yeah, I think a lot of bourbons might be a little too hot for this cigar. Um,
Oh, that
if
rum
you're
is
looking at something that's closer to like a light whiskey, bourbon might be a good choice. But most bourbons are just too sweet and syrupy for a cigar like this. I think they're going to run over the elegance of the cigar.
And, the easy pairing, the easy choice of pairing here would be coffee. Coffee would be a no-brainer with this cigar.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is one of those cigars. Now that you mentioned coffee, this would be a really good, strong morning cigar.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people just want something light, like a Connecticut in the morning, but I like something with a little bit of strength to it. Um, and this has that. It's got that like richness that I think would go really well with coffee in the morning.
Wouldn't give you the wobbly knees. I think it's it's probably what I describe as medium full in flavor and medium in strength, right smack dab in the middle. So if you tend to smoke in the medium plus category, I think this would be fine for a starter cigar of the day.
And we're going to finish up our Armed Forces Radio Network segment here. What is your pairing of the night, Surgeon?
No question, it's the Johnny Walker. Before we wrap up our Armed Forces Radio Network segment, I got to do a shameless plug. Check out developingpalates.com. We've got something special coming for you tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, check it out. A little surprise being launched on the site. Check it out.
Oh, I know what's coming.
It's very exciting.
I'm very excited to see it. For me, the Lagavulin is the winner. I wasn't expecting it to be the winner. I was expecting the Zafra to be the best one.
Right.
But I feel like Scotch, just like a not too aggressive Scotch, works really well with this cigar.
Really well. Yep.
And as I can't say that it's not the Nadura, but I think it probably is. But the Lagavulin has gotten a lot friendlier as the cigar has gone on. It could be the strength of the cigar ramping up a little bit, but I have a feeling it's the Nadura. But still, it just has a really good balance of strength going along with this cigar.
It's not going to stop us from crushing a few bottles in Vegas, I'll tell you that right now.
I'm sure you're correct. So thank you to Warfighter Cigars. If like Surgeon said, if you haven't checked them out, go check them out. You can get some. They've got some very reasonably priced samplers out there where you can try a couple from every line. Interestingly, they ship a lot of their stuff in travel humidors, so you can buy basically a box of cigars, and instead of sending you a box or a bundle, they send it to you in a travel humidor. Then you got a cool travel humidor. So check them out. Thank you, of course, to all of our Armed Forces Radio Network listeners. We appreciate you guys out there doing things we are not built to do. I had a comment that got to me a little bit from a friend. I won't say who it is just because I don't want to embarrass him possibly, but he said that when he was deployed overseas, he listened to the AFRN every day, and it was like a little piece of home. It was his connection to home while he was out in the field, and he just appreciates that we push our content out over there, which it just means a lot to me that somebody would say that. So thank you to all of our Armed Forces Radio Network listeners. Thank you, of course, to all of our podcast listeners and everybody watching live on Facebook or watching the replay on YouTube. We're we're going to get into our After Dark segment here. So everybody have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
Peace.
And now we're in our After Dark segment. I'm going to warn you guys, there are going to be spoilers for Infinity War.
So many spoilers.
If you are watching live and you have not watched Infinity War and you
Stop
plan
now.
to, stop watching now. You can come back. You can watch it later. Did my dog get a cameo? Yeah, he's back there licking my leather chair.
Poppers. Yeah, don't send me angry emails at john@developingpalatus.com. I mean, I'm gonna say, look, we gave you like a full 2 minutes of spoiler warnings. I'm very as you know, I rage about spoilers.
You're the most anti-spoiler person I know.
I want to punch people in the throat who spoil stuff.
Like, so if somebody says that moment with Carl on Facebook, you're like, spoilers, no, and you freak out. Like, it doesn't matter how minor it is. You're the most upset spoiler person I know.
We're gonna ruin the movie if you haven't seen it. So first of all, go get a ticket, because there's no reason why you shouldn't have seen it by now. Like, go see it immediately.
Yeah.
Also,
seriously.
stop the podcast or the live show and come back to it after you've seen the show.
Yeah, seriously, come back to it. We'll be here when you get back. Don't worry about it. And with that said, we're now entering the spoiler section.
Everybody dead.
If you are still
Everybody
watching,
dead.
If you're still watching, the spoilers have started.
Everybody dead.
Yeah, dude, that ending was rough. I mean, we all know that. All right, so
I didn't know George R.R. Martin was the director behind this movie. What the hell?
Dude, I know. Like, they killed, like, in the last 5 minutes of the movie, they kill off like 18 characters. It's insane.
And if you didn't know for sure that
fades to black and it's over.
Yeah. I mean, if you didn't know better, like if it was directed by George R.R. Martin, you'd be like, how can they come out with the most successful black superhero in history with an awesome kick-ass movie like Black Panther and then just do him like that and kill him off? But I mean, you know he's not dead. Come on. I mean, first of all, I'm first in line to see Black Panther 2.
I mean, yeah.
Come on.
That's the thing is Black Panther's already got a sequel. Tom Holland accidentally said they've got 2 Spider-Man sequels coming.
Tom
we
Holland
already know there's another
Guardians
of the Galaxy. Dude, I watched like a mashup of Tom Holland accidentally revealing things, and like just everybody from the cast. Like, have you seen the interview on? I don't remember what it was on. It was on like Good Morning America or something with Don Cheadle and Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
And they were this was back in November. They were promoting Thor. They were promoting Thor Ragnarok, and he's like, "Oh, wait till you see the next movie." I mean, it's a doozy. Like, everybody dies, and Don Cheadle is like, "Dude." And he's like, "I mean, not everybody, but like half." And he's like, "No, stop." And he's yelling at him.
You gotta see the interview with Bunderdak Cumbersnitch, and he's like, "Stop, shut up." Shut up in the middle of the interview.
With Tom Holland where they ask Tom Holland a question about Spider-Man, and Benedict Cumberbatch is like, "I'll take this one, Tom."
I'll take this one.
And just
Shut
answers the question because he knows Tom Holland just can't keep his shit together.
Tom
Holland said in several interviews, they won't let me read the scripts anymore. He gets the Spider-Man pages and that's it.
Could I just say, in all the performances in the movie, and there's a lot of really strong performances across the board, Tom Holland, to me, probably stole the show in that death sequence. I mean, I like to think I'm a tough guy. I don't tear up. You know, I can count on one hand the amount of movies I've teared up at, and they're all pretty intense, like Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan. When Tom Holland laid out that death sequence, I was just like, bro. I mean, it was rough.
Yeah, it was rough. And I really appreciate that he was the only one that got that. Everybody else is a superhero. They're all prepared to die at any moment because they're superheroes. They're going around flying all over the galaxy, saving the world and stuff. You know, they're aware things are going to happen. But he's a kid who's in school, and I like the fact that they didn't have like this elaborate death sequence for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, most people were just like, "Oh shit." And then that was it. But he had it was so emotional.
I felt really bad for Scarlet Witch. I mean, first of all, She had to kill Vision, which was, I mean, that's rough.
That was hard to watch too.
But then to bring him back and kill him again, I mean, you talk about Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Tony Stark, having PTSD for like a million years. I mean, Scarlett's got a little bit of that, but I mean, you know, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Tony Stark, Iron Man, has been through so much negative stuff. And, you know, to see Tom Holland and you know, you saw it in the Spider-Man movie, he was trying to keep this kid away from harm because he didn't want to see anybody else get killed. And then this kid is killed in front of him. And you know, he's taking, right or wrong, he's taking 100% of the fault.
He's begging for him to do something. And there's nothing he can do. It's just the way it is.
So I thought the sequence between Tony Stark and Doctor Strange, I laughed. I was probably the loudest guy in the theater. I did like the full belly guffaw when they're sniping at each other, because I'm like, yeah, here's two guys who are like the biggest narcissist, self-important, self-focused guys, and they hate each other. They hate each other from the moment they're in scene. They just hate each other, and it's like, yeah, those two characters are so alike. No wonder they hate each other. And
the characters don't realize it. And can we talk about Thanos for a minute?
Wow.
I mean, dude. So people praised Black Panther as having like basically the first villain with like an actual motivation.
Yeah, Michael. I forget his last name. Michael
Jordan.
Michael Jordan. He did a fantastic job. Because so often the villains have been two-dimensional, and they're cardboard cutouts.
They just want destruction.
Right.
That's all it is. They just want to kill everybody, and that's it.
And you find yourself kind of feeling for the guy and almost siding with him. You're like, no, I kind of see where he's coming from. Like, that's bullshit. They did this guy wrong. He kind of has a point. And like halfway through the movie of Black Panther, you're like, you know what? I'm almost siding with this guy. He kind of has a point. So that was really well done.
Yeah, but I think they kind of did the same thing with Thanos. Like, they really made Thanos a character who seemed like he believed in what he was doing, and he thought he was the hero in the story.
He really did.
Which I had thought Thanos was going to come in, like, based on all of the end credit sequence and stuff that we've seen over the last 10 years. I thought Thanos was going to be like, all right, here I am, let's destroy the galaxy.
Yeah.
But that wasn't it at all. He didn't want to hurt anybody, but he felt like it had to be done, and he was the only person that had the willpower to actually do it.
And how about props for a movie that starts out with an opening sequence that's like like you don't go from 0 to 60. You are at 60 from the moment the movie starts out. You get arguably one of the best fight sequences of the movie with Hulk versus Thanos. And I mean, I was rooting for Hulk to just wipe the floor with them. And you kind of get this weird whimper from Hulk, and it was heartbreaking.
Well, yeah, and then the fact that he's afraid to come out for the rest of the movie, which I'm excited to see what they do with the next one, like about why was like that exactly.
Because Hulk is strongest of all, and maybe not so much.
Yeah, he really Thanos really put him in his place.
And also the sub baddie, I can't remember the character's name, but the child
of Thanos.
The child of Thanos. So often you get these sub characters, right, that are kind of the sub boss. I mean, it's in Hong Kong action movies you see this a lot. The sub boss is sometimes stronger than the big boss. He was just as entertaining for me as Thanos was. And as a huge movie nerd, and Rob from Mabacho can attest to this, when Tom Holland dropped the aliens thing, I was like, oh yeah, aliens! And Laura kind of looks at me funny, and I'm like, I know exactly what's gonna happen right now. And blow him out the airlock, man.
That part was awesome.
Magical powers. You don't got that Princess Leia power, man. You don't get that Princess Leia. You're going out in space, dog.
Yeah, you just freeze and that's it. That's exactly what happened. I'm trying to remember what else is worth mentioning, because there's a lot of stuff happens.
How about excuse me? How about oh gosh, I can't remember his name. This is so embarrassing. From Game of Thrones, with the surprise cameo, which I didn't expect. Tyrion.
Oh yeah, Peter Dinklage.
Peter Dinklage. as the giant
as
dwarf.
dwarf.
As the giant dwarf, yeah.
I thought that was really clever.
Mm-hmm.
I've read a lot of comic books, but I never made it to the like entire Infinity War series.
It's a lot.
I'm missing a lot of those characters. Like I read Civil War and I read whatever the kind of recent one was that I can't remember the name of. It was the one that had a lot to do with Guardians of the Galaxy. The Watchers were involved.
Right.
Whatever it is where the Watcher dies. And they
so I gotta go back and watch this movie at least 2 or 3 more times because someone pointed out to me this morning that in the scene when they're on the anvil there, there's a sequence in the background because the Russo brothers love to do this stuff. R2D2 is sitting in a pile in the background.
Really, I hadn't heard about that one, and I certainly didn't catch it. I did hear about the. I saw pictures of the Tobias Funk one.
Right, which I didn't get at all. I missed that entirely.
I completely missed it, and it's like having seen some of the screenshots of it, it's pretty prominent.
I don't know how I missed that. I mean, the problem with this movie, if there's a problem, is that there's a lot of people complain about the length, which I don't get.
I mean, it was pretty long. It's 2.5 hours.
Sure, but if you've ever sat through Dances with Wolves in the theater, you know, like you want to talk long, dog, go watch Dances with Wolves in the theater. That movie was like 3 hours and 3.5 hours, almost 4 hours long.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of 3-hour movies in the movie.
Yeah, they had. I mean, this is probably a bad analogy, but to me, it was a little bit like Saving Private Ryan. This movie started out at full bore, and it didn't. There was really no let up. It didn't let up the entire time.
There were a couple like talky scenes, but I mean, for the most part, it's pretty action packed. Like it's really at its core, it's really just a dumb popcorn movie with action all over the place.
So Thor went from kind of one of my like I like Thor. He's an enjoyable character.
Ragnarok brought him up a couple notches.
Ragnarok brought him up a couple notches, but he was kind of a low tier character in the Marvel universe, in the movie universe for me. I liked him in the comics, but in the movie universe, kind of they really elevated his character. And the scene where they're forging Stormbreaker, and then they threw in the twist with Groot being
that was awesome.
That was nuts, crazy.
I loved that part. Like, I don't know. That was another part where it was like, you know, I mean, it got me feeling a little emotional. Like, it's just like, you know, Groot made that sacrifice for him, who's actually apparently the son of Groot. I just recently found out.
Makes a lot more sense because he really doesn't have Groot's personality. In fact, I would actually say that, I mean, it's really tough to shove that many characters into a movie like this and give them all scenes. I kind of felt like Groot was a little overplayed in this.
I mean, all he was doing was playing his Game Boy the whole time.
Yeah.
Which I liked that he was doing that because that's the stage my 5-year-old is in right now. Like, he just he brings his DS everywhere and just wants to play Pokemon all the time. But I loved that they did that with Groot, but I felt like he just had a little too much like screen time comparatively because like you said, I mean, I don't know the number, but there's probably 18 to 25 characters who are like main characters in other movies and are an ensemble in this movie. I think the thing that they did really well or really smartly is that they got all of the backstory out of the way for every character in other movies. So this way, it's all characters you're already familiar with. Yeah. And you don't need to pack in like, who's that guy? Who's that guy? Who's that guy? You don't need to explain who anybody is because if you're going to see this movie, you've probably seen most of the other movies. Yeah.
I did love the simple but hilarious and true to character scene between Winter Soldier and Rocket. Rocket's like, hey,
how much for that gun?
How much for that gun? It's not for sale. Okay. How much for that arm? He's like, I'm gonna get that arm, man. I'm getting that arm off of you. And like, you know, he's gonna come. He wants that arm. He wants that arm. He's gonna try. He's gonna
go for it. So one thing that somebody pointed out is, with almost no exception, I think there's one or two exceptions, only the original the original Avengers survived the movie.
That's true.
The only exception that I know of is I've heard from some people that Rocket Raccoon survived, but I feel like in my mind
He's the only Guardian left.
Okay.
Other than what's her? But she's not a Guardian, so she doesn't count. Yeah, Rocket's look at me. Look at me. I'm the captain now.
Yeah, he really is now. Finally, he got what he wanted. I don't know how happy he'll be about it.
Right. The original Avengers, the only guys left.
The end was heartbreaking to watch. You're expecting some light at the end of the tunnel, and then it just fades to black and it's over.
It's very Empire Strikes Back. Like all your hope has been taken away, right? All your hope has been taken away. Thanos won. Everyone is dead. Everyone is broken. Everyone.
But we all know in the next movie they're gonna get the time stone back and go back in time and undo pretty much all of this. Like the only people who I see not coming back are really maybe Vision. Probably I think Gamora's coming back.
I think Gamora's coming back. I think Vision's going to be back. I think that Loki might be dead for sure.
Loki is the one that I think is very low chance that he's coming back. Mm-hmm. But I think everybody else is going to come back. I mean, a lot of people so one thing that I hadn't thought about that somebody mentioned to me is imagine bringing your I don't know 8-year-old to this movie. I'm gonna be Spider-Man when I grow up, and then all of their heroes are killed,
dead, vaporized. And as a child of born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, so a child of the 80s, people are spoiled because if this movie was made in the 80s, dog, you gotta wait 12 years for the next movie. And the Avengers 4
they've already filmed the next movie.
May. It's coming out in May. You actually get 3 more Marvel movies. I think 3 more Marvel movies. You get Captain Marvel followed by Avengers 4 next year at this time. So people are so spoiled.
In 3 weeks, Ant-Man comes out.
Right.
Which I'm very curious to see where they go with Ant-Man.
Yeah, I don't know where it's placed in the universe timeline.
I feel like it has to be before this.
It has to be.
Or else they're going to spend the entire movie being why did all these people just turn to dust? What's happening?
Fantastic job of almost fitting in Samuel L. Jackson's catchphrase in the end.
Yeah, that was great.
Mm-hmm.
And then seeing the Captain Marvel thing, it was Captain Marvel's going to be Evan Kirshner says he knows that or at least he thinks that Ant-Man takes place before this movie, which would make total sense. I've heard that Captain Marvel takes place mostly during the 90s.
That's what I heard as well, yeah.
So I would guess that it's going to take place during the 90s, and then we're going to see 20 years later, and either somebody time travel's going to be a thing now for sure.
For sure.
So I could see either Captain Marvel going through time to get here, or just flashing forward in the after credits sequence or something like that. Because Captain Marvel, as the producers of the Marvel movies have said, Captain Marvel is going to be immensely powerful, the most powerful character we've ever seen, and I think she's going to play the part of like I said, I don't know a lot about the Infinity War in the comic books, but I know that what's his name, Warlock was Warlock was the big deal. I think she's going to be the Warlock of Infinity War Part 2.
Yeah, I think that serves as sort of the sort of lead into Avengers 4 while still being a standalone property, and I think they're probably going to do a great job. I'm also kind of excited for Guardians of the Galaxy 3 because it sounds like they're going to lead into another Guardians property, and
so what they've said,
Sylvester Stallone.
What they've said is basically that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is the jump-off point of the next arc. So Thanos has been a 10-year arc of 17 movies, 18 movies.
Right.
And
crazy.
Guardians of the Galaxy Part 3 is going to be the jumping off point of the next 10-year arc in the Marvel universe. And I think so Oh, this is another theory that I told my wife as soon as we finished watching the movie. Did I lose Surgeon? He like froze up on the screen. Okay. So this is something I said to my wife as we were leaving the theater. Is I think this is gonna be the point where like Cap and Iron Man and a couple other characters kind of pass the mantle.
Yes.
Because they're, obviously, as everybody knows, they're reaching the end of their contracts. A lot of them are probably tired of playing these characters after 10 years. Even though I heard a report that Robert Downey Jr. got $200 million for this movie.
Wow.
Which had a budget of $300 million.
Wow.
Which, I mean, that's not to say that $200 million came out of the $300 million, because I'm sure a lot of it is merchandising and box office and all that stuff, but still. If he's willing to give up the paycheck, I could see him passing on Iron Man to somebody else. Yeah. And I think that's where we're going to see that transition. That happens in the comics where people take over as the characters age out.
And there, so there's been a lot of, there's a lot of pushback to the Disney franchises and the Marvel franchises and comic book franchises about that. And I think people don't realize that there's a 50-year history of this. Like, to me, like if you're a fan of Doctor Who, one of the things I love about Doctor Who, right, is that they bring in a new character that's the same character, but a new character within the same universe, within the same franchise. And I love the idea that they could bring in a fresh Cap. Whatever ethnic background he's got, whatever gender he's got, I don't care, because I have confidence that the helm that's behind this is going to do a fantastic job with the story writing, and they're going to continue that storyline on, and it's going to be great. And I'm kind of excited to see who they pass the torch to on these various properties. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like in movies, we're used to seeing in movies and TV shows, they just replace the actor or they reboot the franchise. I don't think we're going to see a reboot of this franchise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for like 30 years. Because they're going to continue it, but they're going to find ways to move people out and move new people in, as they've done with the comic books. I mean, and in comic books, they don't even need to do that. There's no reason they need to do that. They just do it because they can make the story more interesting. If Cap is now an old guy that you see, and he's still Captain America, but he's older now. He's aged. He's not in fighting condition. He doesn't want to fight anymore. And he's got people who are younger and better at it than he ever was.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see where they go with it. Oh man, that was a rough way to end the movie.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you could see it. There was so many people in the audience, like people were audibly saying, like, "What the hell just happened?" And so many people walked out of that movie just shocked. And I think I get that because this is me kind of poo-pooing American culture, but one of the things as a Canadian I love about English culture and Hong Kong films is that they don't have any problems ending a movie.
The good guy doesn't always have to win.
That's right. The bad guy wins a lot. And sometimes, Empire Strikes Back is probably one of the most famous American culture movies where the bad guy wins at the end and everyone leaves, and it's still a really satisfying experience. Now, it was definitely a little unsatisfying to see all these people die and Thanos win, and you're like, and you don't feel like any of it's wrapped up.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, I think that's probably good for the franchise because, sometimes good things don't happen at the end, and sometimes the good guys don't win, although I'm sure they'll win eventually.
Yeah, and I think in a few years when you watch the movies back to back, it'll be the way Empire Strikes Back is to people now.
Right.
Like, yeah, everybody loses at the end, but 5 minutes later you watch Return of the Jedi. And then all the good guys win everything.
Exactly.
So I think that's what we're going to see. Are you holding on to your flag?
Yeah.
So it doesn't blow away? Okay, just checking.
Mm-hmm. So I'm holding onto the Nicaraguan flag as a symbol to hold on for the people. I don't know. There's a great sequence at the end when they're fighting Thanos, and Doctor Strange is creating these portals for Superman or Spider-Man to jump through, and there's the little the little comments. He's like, Spider-Man punch, Spider-Man kick. And like it's like just a little bit of levity, and that's what I think the Marvel Universe is so good at, is bringing levity to sequences. Like Gamora feeling Thor's arms, and everyone's like, stop touching his arms. And then
They
my
did a
arms are
really
just
good job of that in this movie.
my arms are just as good as his. And Raccoon turns to him and says, "You're one sandwich away from being fat."
Oh God, that part was so good.
And then he gets all
Didn't he say
self-conscious.
something like, everybody in this room has been thinking for a while, you're one sandwich away from getting fat. Dude,
So
that was
funny.
hilarious.
Did
But
you just
yeah,
deepen
that's
your
something
voice?
Marvel's really
Why
good
you do
at.
that to your voice? I'm not doing anything to my voice.
That's one thing Marvel is so good at is they set a tone near the beginning of the movie and then they
Yeah.
carry that tone throughout. And
Yeah.
this movie, it was all over the map,
Mhm.
but because we had seen it so many times before, it makes sense and it works.
Well, I mean, great job of carrying on 3 or 4 independent storylines happening within the same movie and then threading them all together within the same. Like, you don't see that a lot in a lot of movies, especially with this many moving parts in this many characters. But they did a fantastic job of, not only a storyline independent of what's going on in the main storyline. With this, like, the Guardians felt like a Guardians movie. The Avengers piece felt like an Avengers piece. The Black Panther piece felt like a Black Panther piece, and then they kind of weaved it all together at the end, and it felt seamless. It didn't feel like there was a sudden shift in the tone of the movie.
Yeah, and what I was thinking, I really want to see somebody recut the movie so that it's so that each segment is in chronological order.
That'd be cool.
I'm just interested in seeing how that works in it.
That'd be interesting. But then, you know what? I think the problem with that,
it may
though,
not
is,
work at all.
yeah, I think that's maybe where you'd run into. It'd feel very jarring to go from a style within one movie or one sequence to the next sequence. That's whatever.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just think it would be an interesting experiment.
Great movie.
Yeah,
it set records again, didn't it? Set opening weekend records.
Yeah. It broke whatever the last movie was, Black Panther or Justice League, I think.
Black Panther. Black Panther was the reached. I think it was since Iron Man, or maybe it was Avengers. It reached. It was like on Saturday. Didn't even need the Sunday where it beat the records. But that was. I mean, Black Panther was awesome.
Yeah, it's insane to me that a movie with a budget of $300 million, which, I mean, for people who aren't familiar with movie budgets, that doesn't even include the probably $500 million they spent on marketing.
Yeah.
That's just the cost to finish filming and editing the movie. For them to make back that entire budget in a weekend is crazy.
So I learned a little piece of movie trivia when I was talking about the new Avengers movie. So if you go back, I watched the original Avengers movie, which, by the way, has a super different tone and style, which I really enjoyed. But at the end of the sequence, the big shawarma outtake at the end, there's a sequence where Cap's got his kind of fist against his face, and his face is kind of hidden, and he doesn't speak in the shawarma sort of outtake at the end. The reason for that is that Marvel wisely realized the sequence was filmed after the movie, and Chris Evans had already gone on to another movie. He had grown a beard, and instead of trying to CGI out the beard, they realized, well, that's just going to look stupid, and so they just filmed him.
Here's a little tip, Warner Brothers. Don't try to edit out facial hair.
Doesn't work. It looks terrible. Which, by the way, I watched Justice League. It was just awful.
I haven't watched it yet, but I have.
It's
very
so
low hope.
terrible.
So insanely, I read over the weekend. I was talking to my buddy about, like, I was just kind of speculating what the budget of, and that's how I know it's $300 million because I looked it up. Apparently, until this came out, Justice League had the third highest budget ever.
Wow, what they spend it on?
Exactly.
So bad. And Wonder Woman within the DC franchise was the movie that I was expecting to be a complete flop, and ended up being, within the new DC universe, ended up being my favorite movie of all the new movies they made in DC, by far.
Yeah, absolutely. The Superman movies were just not very good. Like Suicide Squad introduced Batman a little bit, but it was
just not
not a good movie at all.
Not a good movie.
And then Batman versus Superman was awful. Like Batman, the feel I got from Batman versus Superman. I mean, this isn't a Batman versus Superman After Dark segment, but the feeling that I got from
Spoilers.
Batman versus Superman was that no, this isn't even spoilers. Was that they were basically like, all right, well, we have these 3 comic books that have really cool sequences.
Let's just mash them together.
How do we make that into a movie?
So terrible. It was so amateurish.
Like that whole part where he's like, I don't remember it. It was like the dream sequence that Batman had where he had a gun and.
Which could have been cool, by the way. That could have been that felt like X-Men to me. I was like, this is a really cool sequence. And then they just.
Yeah, but it was like, what the hell is happening here?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't make any sense within the movie. And
X-Men franchise, by the way, comes under the umbrella of Marvel now, from 20th Century Fox. Suck it, 20th Century Fox. Oh. I wish you would all burn in hell. Stop making TV properties and stop making movie properties. I hate that studio. I can't even tell you the amount of hatred that I feel for 20th Century Fox, because all of the great television properties that they've made over the years, starting with, and this will take you back to Space Above and Beyond, which was the precursor to allow movie or TV franchises like Firefly to come out. Mm-hmm. And they killed it. They killed it just like they killed Firefly after 1 season. And I hope 20th Century...
They didn't kill Firefly after 1 season. They killed Firefly after like 1 episode and then just aired the rest of the season out of order like insane people.
And out of order, by the way. But yeah, they're taking over the X-Men franchise from 20th Century Fox, and I'm extremely excited to see what Disney and the Marvel Group and the Marvel writers can do. It's going to be so exciting.
To their credit, they've done some cool stuff. Logan was pretty good.
Logan was great.
You probably haven't watched Legion because I don't think anybody watched it.
Bro.
But that
Legion the TV series or Legion the movie?
The show.
Oh, dude, I watched that.
Dude, that show's amazing.
Dude, okay, so for those who are still tuned in and have obviously seen X-Men or Avengers Infinity War, if you aren't watching Legion, the TV series, you're missing out on one of the most unique television comic book series on the market, because it is so different from anything else. It is so
it's different from anything that's ever been on television.
Yeah, it's one part horror with one part gothic with one part I don't even know how to describe it. It's so bizarre and so funky, and it's one of the top 3 shows now. So Expanse is number 1 for me right now. Westworld is number 2. Legion is number 3. The moment Legion comes out, I gotta watch it because it's so interesting.
We're awful, so we haven't watched any of the second season of Legion yet. But I loved the first season so much.
Well, you got to start watching the second season because they absolutely...
See, people in the comments like it. Evan Kirshner watches it. Chris Kelly from Ezra Zion watches it.
Dude, it's so funky. It's so weird and cool and psychedelic and 70s, and it's just awesome.
Yeah, 70s is the right way to put it. I love that it's filmed from the protagonist's viewpoint, which is an insane person.
And he's completely...
Somebody whose mind plays tricks on them, and he's an unreliable narrator.
Yes, that's great phrase.
His internal narrative is unreliable. That's what makes it so good, is that he doesn't even understand what's going on half the time.
And props to Aubrey Plaza, who was kind of a throwaway character in the show. Aubrey Plaza is really the counter crazy to his main crazy, and she is just it's I don't know. I'm trying to think of an actor that's similar, and I'm kind of struggling because she's just, it's like the director said,
nobody like her.
Yeah, it's just we want you to just embrace your crazy and just go with it in every scene. And she's just completely off her rocker, and she's in the background in some scenes. You can't even focus on the conversation because she's just in the background doing crazy things, and it's so entertaining.
Yeah, I adore that show. Maybe I should convince my wife to stay up and watch that tonight.
We can't stop watching it. Laura and I can't stop watching it because it's so funky and weird. And I'm just so through with Arrow and Flash.
I mean, that's the thing is DC just can't get it together, man.
I don't know what the problem is, man.
Everything is segmented and they're trying to really rush the movies. It was they made Superman. And it was all right, that was successful. Let's do an entire universe now.
So terrible. And then Jessica Jones 2 comes out, and I loved it more than Jessica Jones 1. Super excited for Luke Cage.
Yeah. See, I feel like that's the big difference in the way that WB does their shows and the way that Marvel does their shows is they're part of the universe, but they're characters who are so inconsequential within the larger scheme of things that they don't matter at the movie scale. But that's why you make a TV show about them.
By the way, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has sucked for like 2 or 3 seasons, and my fiance just stopped watching because it got so bad.
I did too.
So this season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was like the best season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, it was, I don't know if they fired the writing staff or they threatened them, but the season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was actually like engaging and fantastic and amazing. I couldn't stop watching it, and if they can make the next season like this, it'll be great. But
the next season, half of the characters are going to be gone.
Spoiler.
They're just gonna have like turned to dust in between seasons.
Don't you kill Coulson? Don't you kill Coulson?
Not again. I can't do that one again. That's one that I can't do twice.
Yeah.
Right.
So people are lucky. Like I said, they're very lucky that they have to wait less than 12 months to see follow-up Marvel movies. If you're a child of the 80s, you'd be waiting at least 10 years, maybe 12 years to see a follow-up movie. And
then half the actors would be different people.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more than half. Like, Spider-Man would come back and he'd be a completely different actor, and they would just never address it.
Props to Tom Holland, man. Killed it as Spider-Man.
He really it's crazy because Spider-Man is one superhero that every time they reboot Spider-Man, it's better than the last time.
Yes.
And Spider-Man is the one that kicked off superhero movies.
Which is not something that, well, I would argue with that. So this is my movie nerd. My boy Wesley Snipes, Blade, kicked off the goodness. Everyone talks about the X-Men franchise as being the movie franchise that kicked off superhero franchises being good. I disagree. Blade was the first serious movie franchise with a black main actor that showed you could make a serious superhero movie other than the bad guy, which was just awful. But every other part of that movie was so well done that elevated the entire possibility of what you could do with a movie franchise with comic book heroes.
That's true, but the problem is 60+% of people who saw Blade in the theater had no idea he was from a comic book.
Yeah, no, of course.
Spider-Man was the first one that was like, oh yeah, I know Spider-Man. I read those comic books when I was a kid. That was the first one that kicked off like the whole craze of superhero movies. As much as I love Blade, because I do. But like Peter Parker. What was the first? Tobey Maguire. His Spider-Man was like, it was Spider-Man like we'd never seen him before, and it was amazing.
Yes.
And I adore Sam Raimi. I've loved him since I
was He's a
a
weird cat, but he makes entertaining movies for sure.
And everybody hated Spider-Man 3, but I loved it because it was the most Sam Raimi of the 3.
Yeah, Spider-Man 2 I thought was better because I thought the portrayal of Doc Ock was just very underappreciated. I thought that was, again, one of the things where you could take a bad guy and you could make the movie, like you could empathize with this bad guy, and he was highly entertaining. It wasn't a 2-dimensional cardboard cutout. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And then Andrew Garfield, I had very low expectations for him. But he was the first time that we saw like quippy Spider-Man in a movie.
Yeah, so I look at the Andrew Garfield thing and I go, that to me is like one of those characters where he plays a great Peter Parker, but he doesn't play a great Spider-Man. And I think Batman sort of falls
the other way around.
Really?
I felt like he was better as Spider-Man than he was as Peter Parker.
Interesting. We're gonna have to agree to disagree. But I thought that was kind of like with Batman. That's what the franchise kind of fails, is that you either have a good Batman and a bad Bruce Wayne, or you have a good Bruce Wayne and a bad Batman. And a lot of people talked about, in the recent incarnation, he's a great Bruce Wayne and a terrible Batman.
Yeah. And then the previous one, Christian Bale, he was a fantastic Batman, but
crazy
really
good
great.
Batman. Yeah, he wasn't
really
believable as Bruce Wayne.
As Bruce Wayne. I hadn't thought about it that way.
I know, right? Also, totally off topic. I am so excited for the revitalization of the Karate Kid.
Didn't that come out today?
Did it come out today?
I keep seeing ads on YouTube for it today.
Because, okay, so for those of you who are still tuned in, if you've not seen, there's a movie reviewer guy who talks about Daniel in Karate Kid as being the villain of Karate Kid. And you got to watch this video because it's just incredible, because it will make you 100% believe that Daniel is the villain of Karate Kid. And I was like, that's a really interesting concept and completely believable. And then you watch the trailer for the new Karate Kid, and that's exactly what they've done. Daniel is the villain.
He was beating up on the Cobra Kai.
He's beating up on Cobra Kai, and Cobra Kai guy has become Daniel from the original movie, trying to elevate these kids that are having a rough time on the street and protecting these kids. And Daniel's the bully.
He's a sleazy car dealer now.
Right?
I'm really excited to watch that too. All right, we got to wrap this up. This has been the Marvel Hour with John and Tripp. We'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow with Enrique from 1502 Cigars. And then
relax and enjoy.
Exactly. And then next week we'll be back with sharing our pairings and hopefully another episode of Cigar Chat. So we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching and have a good one.